The sky had turned that peculiar shade of doom that only catastrophic failure could paint. A fine hue, Jax Veridon thought, if one enjoyed contemplating their own impending disintegration. He watched the planetary shield wall flicker like a decrepit light bulb, the once mighty barrier against the universe's unwelcome guests reduced to a cosmic sneeze guard. "You think that's supposed to happen?" murmured Skipper, his voice a cocktail of cynicism and false hope. Skipper was Jax's reluctant sidekick, mostly because Jax had bribed him with leftover rations, and a bottle of something that claimed to be whiskey but tasted like engine degreaser. Jax shrugged, all nonchalance as he checked a chunky wrist device that was either a relic from the pre-apocalypse or just poorly designed. "If you told me last week that I'd be standing here watching our last line of defense get a case of the hiccups, I might have laughed. Hysterically, mind you, but laughed." He paused. "Now I'm just impressed, and slightly nauseated." The shield wall shimmered again, a promise of doom delivered with all the grace of a drunken uncle at a wedding. It sputtered and sparked, a fireworks display for the terminally screwed. "Gotta love a light show," Skipper quipped. "Especially when it's the we're all gonna die variety. Add some popcorn and it's almost entertaining," Jax replied, the sarcasm wrapping around his words like a comforting blanket. The truth, though, clawed at the edges of his bravado. The Zorathi were coming, hungry for human DNA like a diet prescribed by some sadistic alien nutritionist. Apparently, humans had the adaptability gene pool that was the equivalent of a universal all-access pass, and the Zorathi wanted in. "Still don't get what they want with us," Skipper grumbled, scratching his head with fingers that looked like they hadn't seen a good cleaning since before the shield wall was first erected. "You'd think they'd aim for something more presentable." Jax chuckled, a sound devoid of real humor. "That's the kicker, isn't it? Us. The genetic jackpot. Makes you wonder if they've ever been to Earth, or seen a reality TV show." Skipper's laugh was a bark of genuine amusement. "Maybe they think we're all like those models at the center. Pity the bastards if they clone one of us." He gestured at their reflection in a cracked monitor, both looking like they'd been pulled from the bottom of a very deep, very unwashed pit. "Well," Jax said, clapping his hands together in mock enthusiasm, "I guess we should go see if we can stop them from turning one of us into a glorified lab rat." The duo made their way through the remnants of what used to be Lower New York, now just a collection of shattered dreams and broken glass. The streets were eerily quiet, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for someone to finally pull the plug. "Guess the neighborhood's gone downhill," Skipper remarked, kicking a can that had somehow survived all manner of apocalypse. Jax grinned, the wind whipping his coat around him like a shroud. "You should have seen it before. All overpriced coffee and people complaining about gentrification. Now it's just gentrified rubble." They approached the old command center, the last bastion of human ingenuity, or so the brochures claimed. It looked about as welcoming as a shark's grin. The doors creaked open with a sound that could curdle milk at 50 paces. Inside, the lights flickered with the same enthusiasm as a teenager forced to do chores. Jax and Skipper wove their way through the remnants of humanity's last desperate attempts at salvation. Half-baked weapons, tech so outdated it was practically prehistoric, and the unmistakable smell of despair. The kind that settled in your bones and refused to leave like a particularly clingy ex. "And to think they told us to be ready for anything," Jax muttered, his mind flicking through the mess of schematics on a nearby desk. "Yeah," Skipper nodded. "Guess they didn't account for everything being nothing." A voice crackled through the air, dripping sarcasm like a leaky faucet. Boys, you're late to the party, and they've already served the hors d'oeuvres." Enter Dr. Madeline Reeve, the resident genius and all-around sarcastic savior. She was the kind of woman who could convince you to leap off a cliff just to see her smile. Her lab coat flapped behind her as she approached, the harsh fluorescent lighting turning her into the patron saint of snark. "Nice to see you, Madeline," Jax greeted, matching her sarcasm with a grin. "Jax, Skipper," she said, nodding to each of them in turn. Here to see the fireworks up close or just looking for a place to die in peace? Whichever comes first, Skipper shrugged. Madeline rolled her eyes, a gesture she'd perfected over years of dealing with the apocalypse's finest morons. Come on, I've got something you need to see. And no, it's not my collection of sarcastic comments. She led them deeper into the bowels of the facility, past the remnants of humanity's harebrained ideas, until they reached a lab so clean it was almost offensive. Monitors displayed scans of a human figure, underlined by alien symbols that made Jax's head hurt. "Meet the Zoratha's grand plan," Madeline said, gesturing to the screens. "Project Clone a Human." Jax squinted at the data, trying to make sense of the alien gibberish. "So they want to make a human clone. What? They didn't get the memo about our customer service." Madeline leaned against the nearest console, her expression a study in grim amusement. "Seems they think they can replicate our adaptability. Our charm, wit, and resilience. Our stupidity more like," Skipper interjected. "Precisely," Madeline shot back. "But if they succeed, they'll have the ultimate weapon. Imagine a Zorathi army that can adapt like us." "So," Jax said slowly, "we need to convince them that we're not worth cloning." "Exactly," Madeline confirmed. "Or at least sabotage their attempts." Jax ran a hand through his hair, a futile attempt to smooth down the thoughts racing through his mind. "And how exactly do we do that?" Madeline smirked, a glint of mischief in her eyes. "Why do you think I called you too? I need a couple of idiots with nothing to lose." Skipper raised a hand. "I prefer the term reckless heroes, thank you very much." Jax chuckled, feeling the familiar rush of impending doom. "All right, Madeline, count us in. What's first on the agenda?" She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "First, we need to get inside their cloning facility, and I have just the plan." Her grin was feral. "It involves a lot of explosions." "Explosions, you say?" Skipper's eyes lit up like a kid on Life Day. "Now you're speaking my language." Jax nodded, feeling the weight of the task ahead. "All right, let's go blow something up." As they turned to leave, the alarm system sputtered to life, like a tired old man jolted awake from a nap. Red lights bathed the room in an ominous glow. "Looks like they've found us," Madeline said, unnecessarily. "Well," Jax shrugged, reaching for his weapon. "I was getting tired of all this peace and quiet." The doors burst open with a bang that reverberated through the facility, bringing with it the unmistakable scent of scorched metal and ozone. The Zorathi had arrived, and they weren't here to negotiate. Jax exchanged a glance with Skipper and Madeline. "Guess we better make this quick." With weapons in hand and a plan that could generously be described as half-baked, the three charged into the fray, ready to fight for humanity's right to remain uncloned and imperfect. "For what it's worth," Skipper shouted over the din, "I never liked this place anyway." Jax laughed, the sound lost in the chaos. "You and me both, buddy. You and me both." As they disappeared into the haze of battle, one thought lingered in Jax's mind. If humanity had to go out, at least they'd do it with a bang. The door to the decaying command center slammed shut behind Jax, Skipper, and Madeline. The resonant clang reminded Jax of a coffin lid slamming shut, because who didn't love a good metaphor when staring death in the face? They had a new mission now, and it was about as appealing as a Zorathi foot massage. Jax surveyed the room, where a ragtag collection of survivors had gathered. The place reeked of sweat, despair, and the collective hope of a species too stubborn to lie down and die, even when the universe practically begged them to. He caught sight of Dr. Lyra Venn, a woman with a mind sharp enough to cut through the crap and a tongue even sharper. Next to her loitered Aiden Quell, a former military strategist who looked like he'd seen too many bad days and drank his way through most of them. Jax approached them, Skipper and Madeline in tow. "Looks like the reunion party is in full swing," he said, throwing his arms wide like a ringmaster introducing his circus of misery. Lyra barely looked up from the tablet she was engrossed in. "If this is your idea of a party, remind me never to accept your dinner invitations." "Don't worry," Jax replied. "My cooking could be classified as a war crime." Skipper snorted, nudging Aiden, who hadn't stopped studying a holographic map that flickered like the shield wall had a few moments ago. You still have that stick up your ass, or has it worked its way up to your brain yet? Aiden gave a sardonic chuckle without looking up. Funny you ask. I think it found a shortcut. What's the plan, Veridon? God knows it can't be worse than my last one. Jax grinned, albeit without much warmth. We're gonna liberate a cloning device from the Zoratha's sticky fingers. It's hidden beneath the ruins of New Geneva. Should be a walk in the park, if that park was on fire and filled with rabid squirts. Lyra finally looked up, her eyes a mix of curiosity and exasperation. A device? You mean the prototype they were rumored to be working on before everything went to hell? The very same, Madeline added, her voice dripping with dry amusement. Looks like we're going to crash the galaxy's worst science fair. Aiden nodded, taking in the information with the kind of grim acceptance you only got after years of dealing with impossible odds. All right, so we're talking about sneaking into a Zorathian-infested, decaying lab to steal their prized toy. Sounds like a great way to get ourselves killed. That's the spirit, Jax replied. If we're gonna go out, let's make sure it's in a blaze of glory, or at least a small, satisfying puff of smoke. Lyra rolled her eyes and gestured to the map. If you're serious about this, and I can't believe I'm saying this, we'll need a plan. Aiden grimaced. I've got a rough layout of the lab from what intel we could scrape together. It's mostly conjecture and hearsay, but it's what we've got. Sounds like my last blind date, Skipper quipped, eliciting a chuckle from Madeline. Okay, Jax said, getting serious. We sneak in, grab the device, and sabotage their plans. Simple, right? Lyra smirked with the kind of wry humor that came from knowing just how deep they were in it. Simple as quantum physics on a bad day, right? Easy peasy, Skipper muttered, checking his weapon with the kind of care normally reserved for delicate machinery, or in his case, an old friend. I suppose we'll be negotiating with plasma then. Negotiation's always been your strong suit, Madeline replied dryly. Jax looked around at his makeshift team, each person holding a piece of humanity's last hope, or last mistake, depending on how things shook out. All right, team, let's move. The trip to New Geneva was a journey through the past, present, and what everyone hoped was not the future. The ruins loomed like ghosts, whispering tales of a civilization that had once thought itself invincible. Now, all that was left were the echoes of hubris and the ever-present dust. Aiden led the way, his experience in navigating war-torn landscapes coming in handy. Keep close, and for the love of whatever deity you believe in, try not to trip over anything. Skipper grumbled under his breath about the distinct lack of deities these days, while Lyra kept her focus on the readings from her tablet. I'm picking up faint energy signatures. Must be the cloning device. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but the haystack's on another planet. No pressure then, Jax added, glancing at the crumbling structures around them. Let's just hope the Zorathi aren't keeping up with regular maintenance or health and safety. They reached the entrance to the lab, a half-collapsed doorway that looked like it had suffered more than its fair share of alien invasions and bad weather. Jax took a deep breath, trying to ignore the tightening knot in his stomach. Ready? Lyra adjusted her glasses, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. As I'll ever be. Just another day at the office, Aiden said, pulling out a compact device that looked suspiciously like a bomb. Jax raised an eyebrow. Nice touch. Where'd you get that? Aiden shrugged. Let's just say I've got my sources. Fantastic, Skipper said, his tone cheery with false bravado. Let's knock and see if the Zorathi are home. The door yielded with a reluctant groan after a little encouragement from Aiden's device. Inside, the lab was a testament to chaos. Wires hung like jungle vines, half-functioning consoles flickered in the darkness, and the air hummed with energy that could only mean one thing. The device was active. Well, if it isn't the heart of madness, Lyra whispered, her eyes scanning the room. Madeline nodded, pulling out a small scanner. We need to disable it before they finish whatever human-flavored abomination they're cooking up. Jax nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like a particularly clingy monkey. All right, team, let's give the Zorathi a taste of human ingenuity or sheer dumb luck. They moved quickly, the tension in the air palpable. Lyra worked on the main console, her fingers flying over the keys with a speed that spoke of years spent in labs. I can access the device, but it's going to take some time to plant the virus. Time we don't have, Aiden muttered, glancing nervously at the entrance. I'll keep watch. They'll know we're here soon enough. Skipper and Madeline took up positions, their weapons ready. Just another day saving the human race, Skipper quipped. No big deal. Jax stayed close to Lyra, his presence a silent shield against whatever threat might come barreling through the door. You got this. Lyra glanced at him, confidence and determination written all over her face. If I don't, we're screwed. So yes, I got this. The moments ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity as Lyra worked her magic on the console. The lab around them buzzed with energy, the alien technology a stark reminder of just how far out of their depth they were. But humans were nothing if not stubborn. Suddenly, the air was filled with a guttural roar as the Zorathi made their presence known. They burst into the room, their forms an unsettling amalgam of flesh and machine, like nightmares given form. Aiden fired the first shot, a blast of energy that lit up the room in a brilliant flash. Here they come. The ensuing firefight was a symphony of chaos, each shot a note in the discordant melody of survival. Jax fired off shots, the recoil a familiar jolt up his arm as he tried to hold the line. Lyra, he shouted over the cacophony. How's it going? Almost there, she replied, her voice tight with concentration. Just a few more seconds. Seconds are a luxury, Madeline barked, taking out a Zorathi that had gotten too close for comfort. We've got company. Jax focused on keeping the path clear for Lyra, each shot a prayer to whatever cosmic forces might be listening. The Zorathi pressed forward, their numbers seemingly endless. Then, with a triumphant shout, Lyra slammed her hand down on the keyboard. Done. Virus is uploaded. Jax grinned despite the chaos. Time to get the hell out of here. They fell back in a controlled retreat, each step a gamble as they fought to keep the Zorathi at bay. The lab crackled with energy, the device already beginning to fail under the weight of Lyra's digital sabotage. The team reached the entrance, Aiden covering their retreat with his relentless fire. Move, move. They burst into the open air, the cold night a welcome embrace after the claustrophobic confines of the lab. Behind them, the structure shuddered as the Zorathi's prized device began its death throes. Jax looked back, watching as the lab fell into chaos, the Zorathi caught in the wreck of their own making. Looks like we gave them something to think about. Skipper let out a breathless laugh. And they say we never do anything nice for them. Madeline grinned, her face flushed with the thrill of survival. Now let's get out of here before they get any ideas about retaliation. They moved quickly, eager to put distance between themselves and the smoldering ruins of New Geneva. As they made their way back to the command center, Jax felt the familiar weight of their fight, a burden he'd carry until they found a way to end this once and for all. But for now, they'd given humanity a fighting chance, however slim. And if the universe wanted them dead, well, it would have to try a hell of a lot harder. As the team skulked away from the smoldering remains of New Geneva, the universe decided to remind them that it had no plans of making their lives easy, because why would it? Just as they were starting to feel the bittersweet taste of survival, something shimmered ahead. A Zorathi patrol emerging from the shadows like a bad haircut you can't quite believe is real until it's too late. Jax's heart sank faster than a lead balloon. He threw his arm out, signaling everyone to halt. Well, shit, he whispered. Looks like we've got company. Again. Skipper peered at the advancing figures through the murk, his face set in a grimace that said he'd rather be anywhere else. They looked more annoyed than usual. Did you forget to send a thank you note for the last time we crashed their party? A simple oversight, Jax replied dryly. You can handle the RSVP next time. Lyra's eyes flicked up from her tablet, which she'd been clutching like a security blanket. We're too close. They'll smell us faster than a Zorathi can say human buffet. Perfect, Aiden muttered through clenched teeth, his fingers twitching towards his weapon. They're smarter now. Great. Just what we needed. Smarter and uglier, Madeline added, her tone laced with the kind of disdain usually reserved for bureaucrats and bad coffee. Double threat. The Zorathi patrol was indeed closing in, their gait more deliberate and organized than before. They weren't just bumbling into view, they were executing a textbook maneuver, a phrase Jax had hoped to never say about the Zorathi. "Any bright ideas?" Skipper asked, his sarcasm as sharp as his hastily drawn weapon. Jack scanned their surroundings looking for inspiration or, failing that, a good hiding spot. The ruins of New Geneva stretched around them, a labyrinth of crumbled dreams and broken realities. "All right, listen up. We need to split up and lead them on a merry chase through the debris. Use the terrain to our advantage." "And then what? Hope they trip and fall on their faces?" Madeline asked, raising an eyebrow. "Pretty much. We regroup at the rendezvous point when it's safe. I know it's a stretch, but try not to die." "That's the plan. Distract and survive," Aiden said, already moving into position. "Got any better ideas, former military genius?" "Right," Aiden grumbled. "Distract and survive it is then." The team scattered like roaches in the light, each member vanishing into the ruins with a practiced ease that spoke volumes about their lives post-apocalypse. Jax found himself crouched behind what had once been an impressive Corinthian column, now reduced to a pathetic stub of its former glory. The Zorathi patrol moved past his hiding place, their mechanical limbs clinking softly against the ground. Jax held his breath, counting the seconds, waiting for the perfect moment to spring his trap, the oldest trick in the book, a distraction worthy of any mischief maker. As the last of the patrol slunk by, Jax hurled a battered canister he'd picked up off the ground. It clattered noisily against a nearby pile of rubble, drawing the Zorathi towards it like moths to a very loud, very dangerous flame. "Go, go, go!" Jax hissed into his wrist device, the message relayed to his scattered team. Lyra, from her vantage point, watched the Zorathi converge on the noise with a bemused look. "And there goes the neighborhood," she said to nobody in particular, before slipping away into the shadows. Aiden, meanwhile, had taken up a sniper's perch in what was once a public art installation, now a skeletal reminder of the city's pretense. "Got your back, Jax. Let's make this quick." Skipper and Madeline were up ahead, drawing the rest of the patrol with the kind of heckling only humans could pull off. "Hey, over here!" Skipper yelled, his voice echoing through the ruins like a demented Pied Piper. "Are those faces, or did someone staple a bunch of hamsters to a toaster?" The Zorathi, possibly confused by the insult or maybe just offended, surged after them, their pursuit relentless. Madeline fired off a few shots, more to annoy than to kill. "Catch us if you can, you chrome-plated chickens." As the Zorathi gave chase, Jax regrouped with Aiden and Lyra, their breaths coming in ragged gasps from the exertion and adrenaline. "Well, that was fun. I vote we never do it again." "Don't worry," Lyra replied, her voice tinged with sarcasm. "I'm sure we'll have plenty of equally terrible opportunities in the future." Aiden nodded, his eyes scanning the ruins for any sign of pursuit. "We can't keep relying on luck. They are adapting faster than we are." "Yeah, well," Jax said, "we'll just have to adapt faster." The trio made their way through the rubble, dodging the occasional Zorathi patrol that seemed to pop up like weeds in a neglected garden. They moved with the kind of desperation and determination that only came from being the universe's favorite punching bag. Skipper and Madeline met them at the rendezvous point, looking none the worse for wear, though their expressions were a mix of triumph and exhaustion. "Think we lost them," Skipper panted, wiping sweat from his brow. "For now, anyway." "Good," Jax said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Let's just hope they don't find us again anytime soon." Madeline shook her head, her smile more grimace than grin. "And here I thought this was going to be a relaxing evening." Skipper let out a bark of laughter. You know what they say about plans and the universe, right? Make one and the other screws you over. Sounds about right, Jax replied. But if we're going to do more than just play hide and seek, we need to outsmart them. Lyra sighed, rubbing her temples as if trying to massage away the headache forming there. Easier said than done. We need a plan that's more sophisticated than duck and cover. How about a trap? Aiden suggested, looking thoughtful. They're getting cocky. We use that against them. Jax nodded slowly, the glimmer of an idea forming in his mind. All right, let's give them something to chew on. We'll set a bait, make them think they've got us cornered. And then what? Skipper asked. Tell them a joke and hope they die laughing. Close, Jax said with a grin that had more teeth than warmth. We'll lead them into a dead end and let them think they've won. Then we hit them with everything we've got. Lyra glanced at him, her expression skeptical. And where exactly do we plan to find everything? Jax shrugged. Improvisation, human ingenuity, a little bit of luck and a whole lot of explosives. Sounds like a plan, Madeline said, her tone a blend of sarcasm and resolve. If we're going down, let's at least make it memorable. The group spent the next few hours preparing their trap, gathering whatever they could find in the ruins that might pass for weaponry. Old tech, discarded construction materials, and a particularly robust vine that Skipper insisted was perfect for setting snares. As night fell, they positioned themselves around their chosen battleground, a narrow alleyway flanked by crumbling buildings that still bore the scars of the planet's fall from grace. It was a place that had seen better days, though not by much. Jax lay in wait, his heart pounding in his chest like a drumbeat of doom. The Zorathi weren't the only ones adapting. If humans were anything, they were survivors. It was time to remind the universe why. The patrol appeared as predicted, drawn in by the cleverly laid false trail of discarded gear and strategically placed noisemakers. They moved with a confidence that only came from thinking themselves the apex predators in this twisted game of cat and mouse. As they entered the alley, Jax gave the signal. Skipper triggered the first trap, a cascade of rubble that sent the Zorathi scrambling for cover, right into the second part of their plan. From his vantage point, Aiden fired a well-aimed shot that hit the makeshift explosive they'd rigged from salvaged parts. The explosion was a modest affair, but enough to disorient and incapacitate several of the Zorathi, sending them into a frantic, disorganized retreat. "Let's go," Jax shouted, rallying his team. They swooped in with a coordinated precision that belied their ragtag nature, taking advantage of the confusion to pick off the remaining patrol with an efficiency that would have been impressive if it wasn't so utterly necessary. In a matter of minutes, the alley was silent again, save for the soft hissing of damaged tech. Jack stood amidst the wreckage, a grim satisfaction settling over him. Well, that was something. Skipper clapped him on the shoulder, his grin wide and genuine. Hell of a something. Maybe we do stand a chance after all. Lyra, still holding her tablet like a lifeline, nodded. If nothing else, we've proven the Zorathi aren't invincible. Yeah, Jack said, looking at his ragtag team with a kind of pride that was as unexpected as it was welcome. We might be outgunned, but we're not outsmarted. Not yet, anyway. As they made their way back to the command center, the weight of what they'd accomplished settled in, a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. They were still alive, still fighting, and for now, that was enough. The universe might still have it out for them, but Jax and his team weren't going down without a fight. Who knows, maybe they'd even win this thing. Or at least enjoy making the Zorathi regret ever thinking of humans as easy prey. The command center's air was thick with the kind of tension that only grows when you realize the universe hates your guts, and you've got no choice but to keep going. Jax stood at the center, looking less like a leader and more like someone who'd forgotten why he'd volunteered for this suicide mission in the first place. So, how do we get inside the lab without becoming Zorathi stew? Skipper asked, lounging in his seat like he owned the joint. We exploit their tech dependence, Jax declared, as if he'd said something profound. They rely on their gadgets so much, they're practically blind without them. Ah, yes, Madeline chimed in, Because when I think of advanced alien species, I think of electronic incompetence. Exactly, Jax replied, ignoring the sarcasm. We hack their systems, create a diversion, and slip in while they're trying to reboot their precious computers. Doctor. Lyra Venn, never one to miss a chance to point out flaws, raised an eyebrow over her tablet. And who's doing the hacking? You. Last time you tried, you short-circuited your own wrist device. That was a minor technical hiccup, Jax said, crossing his arms defensively. Besides, I wasn't talking about hacking in the traditional sense. We have an ace up our sleeve. Do tell, Aiden Quell grunted, barely looking up from the holographic map flickering like a cheap sci-fi prop. Jax grinned, a mix of mischief and desperation. We let them think they are winning, draw them into a trap of their own making. Great, Skipper said, clapping his hands slowly. Let's just hope they are as gullible as they are hideous. With the plan vaguely taking shape, the team set about preparing for their arguably suicidal mission. Lyra, with her eternal tablet, worked on creating a false signal to lure the Zorathi into a wild goose chase, while the rest gathered their meager supplies. The lab was nestled within the heart of New Geneva's wreckage, a place that even cockroaches would think twice about inhabiting. Its security system was rumored to be tighter than a miser's purse, but Jax had an uncanny knack for doing the impossible, often without dying, which was always a plus. The journey to the lab began with the kind of stealth you'd expect from a group more accustomed to running and gunning. As they approached the perimeter, Lyra activated the signal disruptor, a cobbled-together mess of wires and hope. It spat static into the airwaves, filling the Zorathi comms with the kind of white noise that could drive anyone insane. Time to see if this is worth the migraine, Lyra muttered, tapping her tablet with a bit more force than necessary. The Zorathi patrols, true to form, responded predictably. Their comms fizzled, panicking them like cats caught in a laser light show. The team slipped through the initial defenses, moving from shadow to shadow like the universe's most sarcastic phantoms. Smooth sailing so far, Madeline whispered, her voice carrying just a hint of disbelief. Don't jinx it, Aiden snapped, eyes darting around like a paranoid squirt. They moved deeper into the complex, the sterile corridors contrasting sharply with the chaos outside. It was the kind of place that would have been impressive if you weren't trying to rob it blind. As they reached the inner sanctum, which was a fanciful way of describing a room full of expensive-looking equipment, they realized they'd miscalculated something crucial. Zorathi Commander Ulthax was expecting them. Ah, the famous Jax Veridon, Ulthax's voice boomed through the speakers, dripping with the kind of smugness that could only come from someone who'd caught their prey. I've been waiting for you, humans. Fantastic, Jax muttered, glancing at his team. Just what we needed, a fan club. The doors slammed shut behind them with a metallic clang that echoed ominously. Trapped like rats in a cage, their options were rapidly dwindling. Ulthax continued, unaware or uncaring of the humans' rising panic. You thought you could outwit us, such charming arrogance, but you see, I have a particular interest in your species' remarkable adaptability. Jax exchanged a glance with Lyra, who shrugged as if to say, What did you expect? What's the plan, fearless leader? Skipper asked, his usual sarcasm tempered by the reality of their predicament. Working on it, Jax replied, a bead of sweat trickling down his neck. Suggestions are welcome, by the way. Maybe we could bore him to death with one of your speeches, Madeline suggested, eyes scanning the room for anything useful. Aiden, ever the pragmatist, was already fiddling with his wrist device. We need to override their security, open those doors. Otherwise, we're screwed. Yeah, well, easier said than done, Jax conceded, trying to come up with a plan that didn't end with them as alien lab rats. Lyra, any chance you can disrupt their systems further? Lyra frowned, her fingers dancing across the tablet. I can try, but this is more advanced than anything we've tackled before. It'll take time, and time is one luxury we don't have, Jax muttered, feeling the weight of leadership like an anvil on his shoulders. The team scrambled to set up a makeshift defense, overturning tables and scavenging equipment for any edge they could find. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. As Ulthax's forces prepared to breach their position, Jax could almost hear the universe laughing at their plight. "Here they come," Aiden said, readying his weapon with the resigned air of someone who's done this too many times before. The first wave of Zorathi soldiers advanced, their footsteps a clattering symphony of doom. Jax and his team opened fire, the room erupting into chaos as lasers crisscrossed the air like deadly fireflies. Jax ducked behind cover, returning fire with a grim determination. "If we make it out of this, remind me to rethink my life choices." "Assuming we have a life after this," Skipper quipped, narrowly avoiding a shot that would have made his sarcasm permanent. Despite the odds, the team held their ground, their resolve as unyielding as their wit. But it was only a matter of time before the Zorathi overwhelmed them. Jax knew their only hope lay in turning the tide, using the very trap set against them. "Lyra," Jax shouted over the din. "How's that system override coming?" "Working on it," she yelled back, her tablet glowing ominously as she hacked her way through layers of alien code. As the Zorathi pressed their attack, Jax's mind raced. They needed a miracle, or at the very least, a strategic blunder from Ulthax. It was then that he noticed something, a small panel on the wall, its design distinctly human. A weak point, perhaps. Jax gestured for Aiden to cover him, then dashed across the room, laser fire zipping past like angry hornets. He reached the panel, yanked it open, and found the emergency override, a relic from the lab's human origins. Come on," Jax muttered, punching in a sequence he'd long memorized but never had the chance to use. The doors slid open with a reluctant groan, like a sleepy giant waking up on the wrong side of the bed. The sudden change in pressure sent the Zorathi stumbling, and the humans seized the opportunity to push back. "Time to go," Jax shouted, leading the charge through the open doors. The team sprinted down the corridor, the sound of battle fading behind them. Ulthax's voice pursued them, a digital ghost. "You can't run forever, humans. I will perfect the human clone." "Not today, you won't," Jax muttered, even as he knew this was far from over. They burst out into the open, the night sky above a reminder of just how small they were in the grand scheme of things. But small as they were, they'd survived another day. Panting and battered but alive, the team regrouped, a mixture of elation and fatigue settling in. Jax looked at each of them, a ragged band of misfits who'd somehow defied the odds once more. "Well," Skipper said, breaking the silence, "that was fun. Let's never do it again." "Agreed," Madeline replied, her smile wry. "But if we have to, let's at least charge admission next time." Lyra tucked her tablet under her arm, her expression thoughtful. "Ulthax won't stop. He's got a fixation that borders on obsession." "Good," Jax said, surprising even himself with the venom in his voice. "Because neither will we." They made their way back to the command center, the path ahead uncertain but no longer hopeless. The night's events had proven one thing: they could stand up to the universe's cruelty and live to joke about it. As they settled in for whatever brief respite they could claim, Jax couldn't help but feel a sense of camaraderie. They were flawed, weary, and cynical, but they were human. And in a universe determined to snuff them out, that was their greatest weapon. "Next time, though," Aiden said, settling into his chair, "let's make sure we have an actual plan." Jax chuckled, a sound that was more relief than humor. "You got it, former military genius. Next time we'll be ready." The team shared a moment of laughter, a rare and precious thing in their grim reality. The universe might have it out for them, but they'd proved one thing: humans were a resilient bunch. And as long as they had each other, they stood a fighting chance. As the night wore on, they drifted into an uneasy sleep, the weight of the future looming but not as heavy as before. They'd faced the worst and emerged with their humor intact, a small victory perhaps, but a victory nonetheless. In the darkness, Jax allowed himself a moment of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could turn the tide. After all, if they'd learned anything from their struggles, it was this: The universe might be vast and indifferent, but humans were stubborn, irreverent, and damn hard to kill. The command center was now a distant memory, replaced by the sterile hellhole of New Geneva's lab. The team found themselves lined up like misfit toys, each one sporting an accessory of shiny metal cuffs that screamed, "Get comfortable, you'll be here a while." "Well, haven't they rolled out the red carpet?" Skipper muttered, eyeing the restraints with disdain. "Nothing says welcome like alien handcuffs." Jax tried to ignore the growing sense of claustrophobia. "I always wanted to see the inside of a Zorathi lab," he said. "Turns out it's just as charming as advertised." Madeline snorted. Charming like a migraine. Their captors had apparently decided that being caught wasn't enough of a humiliation. The room around them was filled with Zorathi tech, glowing panels, ominous instruments, and screens displaying readouts in a language that looked like a keyboard had sneezed all over it. "Look on the bright side, guys," Aiden said, his voice dripping sarcasm. "At least we won't have to worry about where our next meal's coming from. They're about to clone us some new bodies. If they can figure out how to operate this junk," Lyra added, clutching her tablet as if it could somehow shield her from what was coming next. Jax looked around at his team, his ragtag, cynical bunch of comrades who'd followed him into this literal alien trap. "Any brilliant ideas?" he asked, though the question was mostly rhetorical. The Zorathi were scanning their DNA with the enthusiasm of a toddler attacking a birthday cake, and it was only a matter of time before they succeeded in whatever nefarious scheme they had planned. "Still waiting on that miracle," Skipper replied, not missing a beat. And then, as if the universe had a twisted sense of timing, Dr. Lyra Ven's tablet chirped. It was the kind of sound that made everyone freeze, a high-pitched beacon of hope or doom. Lyra's eyes widened as she glanced at the screen, her expression a mix of disbelief and grim determination. "Please tell me that's our miracle," Madeline said, her voice tinged with desperation. Lyra nodded slowly, as if afraid to jinx whatever slim chance had just presented itself. "Dr. Ven," she whispered, holding up the tablet for Jax to see. It displayed a coded message, pulsing faintly. She found a vulnerability in their cloning tech. "They're not as invincible as they think. Care to elaborate on that?" Aiden asked, his eyes darting from the tablet to the imposing machinery around them. "Apparently, the Zorathi tech is a bit like a high-maintenance lover," Lyra explained, tapping the tablet thoughtfully. "One small glitch, one bit of code out of place, and the whole operation goes belly up." Jax leaned closer, hope flickering like a candle in the dark. "And Dr. Ven just dropped this into our laps out of the goodness of her heart, or the goodness of not wanting her DNA added to the Zorathi catalog," Lyra replied, a ghost of a smile on her lips. "Either way, it's our ticket out." "So what's the plan?" Skipper asked, his voice tinged with the kind of optimism that only comes from having nothing left to lose. "We disrupt their systems," Lyra said, fingers flying over the tablet like a pianist with a vendetta. "If we can screw up their cloning process, it might give us the distraction we need to make a run for it." "And how do we pull that off?" Jax asked, the skepticism clear in his voice. "Leave that to me," Lyra replied, her expression one of grim determination. "You just focus on getting us out once the chaos starts." Jax glanced at the others, the weight of their situation pressing down on him like a physical force. The odds were long, the risks immense, but what choice did they have? "All right," he said finally, taking a deep breath. "Let's break some alien toys." The Zorathi, oblivious to the betrayal lurking in their own tech, continued their preparations. Jax could almost hear the countdown to their doom ticking away, each second bringing them closer to whatever twisted fate Ulthax had planned. "Hey, remember when we thought this was a good idea?" Madeline asked, breaking the tense silence. "Yeah, what were we thinking?" Skipper replied. "Next time, let's try something less suicidal, like juggling plasma grenades." Aiden chuckled, a sound that was equal parts amusement and resignation. "I'd say this is a learning experience, but we haven't learned anything other than how to get caught." Lyra's fingers never stopped moving, the tablet a blur of activity. "Got it," she said, a triumphant edge to her voice. Now we just wait for the fireworks, and fireworks there were. The machinery around them began to hum ominously, lights flickering as if caught in a sudden storm. The Zorathi technicians, so sure of their superiority, scrambled in confusion, their guttural shouts echoing through the lab. "Looks like someone's about to have a very bad day," Jax said, unable to suppress a grin. "Let's hope it's not us," Aiden replied, his grip on his weapon tightening in anticipation. The chaos that followed was the kind that only happens when the universe decides to roll the dice with malicious glee. The lab erupted into pandemonium as systems malfunctioned, equipment sparked, and alarms blared like an orchestra on speed. "Time to go," Jax shouted, the words barely audible over the cacophony. The team sprang into action, years of running and gunning kicking in as they made a break for the exit. The Zorathi, caught in the throes of their own technological missteps, could do little to stop them. It was a small victory, a fleeting moment of triumph snatched from the jaws of defeat. "Keep moving," Jax urged, leading the charge through the corridors, now lit with the eerie glow of emergency lights. "Don't look back." "Not planning to," Skipper yelled, narrowly avoiding a falling piece of ceiling. The team navigated the labyrinthine passageways, the way forward uncertain but propelled by adrenaline and sheer desperation. Behind them the sounds of chaos continued, a testament to Lyra's handiwork and Dr. Ven's well-timed intervention. "Almost there," Lyra gasped, her voice a mix of exhaustion and determination. They burst through the final set of doors, the night air a welcome slap in the face after the stifling confines of the lab. The stars above were indifferent witnesses to their escape, twinkling coldly in the vastness of space. "Now what?" Madeline asked, panting heavily as they regrouped outside. "We find a way back to the command center," Jax replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "And figure out how to keep Ulthax off our backs." "That sounds like a tomorrow problem," Skipper said, collapsing onto the ground with a groan. "Right now, I just want to appreciate not being a science experiment." Aiden looked back towards the lab, where the glow of fires and the frantic movement of Zorathi figures were visible even from a distance. "Think they'll come after us?" "They will," Lyra said, her expression grim but resolute. "But we bought ourselves some time, and with any luck, we've given Ulthax something to think about." Jax nodded, feeling a flicker of hope amidst the weariness. They defied the odds once more, proving that humanity had a knack for survival even in the face of overwhelming adversity. "All right, let's move," he said, forcing himself to his feet. "We've got a long walk ahead." The team trudged onward, a ragged but unbeaten line against the uncaring universe. They were battered, outnumbered, and constantly on the brink of disaster, but they were also stubbornly alive. In the end, that was what mattered. In a cosmos that seemed determined to erase them, they persisted, fueled by snark, tenacity, and the kind of camaraderie that only comes from shared near-death experiences. As they headed towards an uncertain future, Jax couldn't help but smile. They might not have all the answers, but they had each other, and that was more than enough to keep fighting. The team stumbled through the underbrush like a pack of drunkards after a particularly spectacular pub crawl, the night air thick with the smell of burning Zorathi tech and the faint hope of survival. Jax led the way, his mind a whirlwind of possible escape plans, each more dangerous than the last. The lab had been a hell of a mess, but they'd made it out alive, barely. "Next time, remind me to bring an exit strategy that doesn't involve running for our lives," Aiden grumbled, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Sure thing," Jax shot back, not missing a beat. "I'll add it to our list of things we're terrible at, right under not getting caught by homicidal aliens," Skipper added, his voice dripping with ironic cheer. Lyra, still clutching her trusty tablet like a lifeline, glanced around. "How far do you think until they catch up?" "Far enough for us to enjoy the fresh air," Jax replied, casting a wary eye over his shoulder. "Or in other words, not nearly far enough." Well, on the bright side, if they do catch us, maybe they'll give us a better cell this time, Madeline quipped, kicking at a rock in her path. The group continued, each step dragging them closer to the command center, or whatever was left of it. The universe had a knack for kicking them when they were down, and Jax wasn't about to give it the satisfaction of seeing him sprawled in the dirt. "All right, folks," Jax announced, halting the group at a fork in the path. "We've got two options, the scenic route through the woods or the direct path that's probably crawling with Zorathi. Scenic route sounds lovely," Aiden muttered, eyes scanning the trees for any sign of movement. "I hear the wildlife is just delightful this time of year. Just our luck if we end up as a Zorathi Buffett special," Skipper added, his gaze lingering on the shadowy undergrowth. "Let's not stick around to find out," Jax said, making the executive decision to plunge into the woods. "Keep your eyes and ears open." We've dodged enough bullets today without adding alien teeth to the list. The group pressed on, foliage brushing against their legs like 1,000 unwelcome fingers. The darkness felt suffocating, but Jax found solace in the fact that it also kept them hidden from prying Zorathi eyes. "Anyone else feel like we're being watched?" Madeline asked, her voice barely a whisper in the gloom. "Paranoia's just another word for staying alive," Jax replied, tightening his grip on his weapon. "And considering we're the galaxy's least wanted, I'd say feeling paranoid is a healthy habit. Just once I'd like to be wanted for something good," Skipper said, his voice wistful. "Like a hero's welcome or a free beer." "Aim high, Skipper," Lyra said, her lips curving into a tired smile. "Dreams are about all we've got left at this point." The night stretched on, each passing hour a testament to their determination, or stubbornness, depending on your perspective. Finally, the outline of the old command center loomed ahead, its dilapidated structure a bittersweet sight. "Home sweet home," Aiden remarked, voice laced with sarcasm. "And here I thought I'd never miss this dump. At least here we can regroup," Jax said, ushering the team inside. "Figure out our next move before the Zorathi come knocking. Anyone else feel like we've got a target painted on our backs?" Madeline asked, collapsing into a chair with a groan. "More like a full neon sign," Skipper replied, rubbing a hand across his face. "But hey, at least it makes us easy to find." Lyra was already tapping away on her tablet, fingers a blur of activity. "I'll see what I can pull from the system. Maybe we can get a heads up if the Zorathi decide to make an appearance." Jax nodded, feeling a semblance of control return. "Good thinking. Whatever edge we can get, we'll take it." As the team settled into their makeshift sanctuary, Jax took a moment to reflect. They'd survived against all odds, but the looming threat of the Zorathi was a shadow that refused to leave. "So, what's the plan now?" Madeline asked, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Jax leaned back, his mind racing with possibilities. "We keep doing what we do best, fighting back. The Zorathi want us for our DNA, but we're not just going to roll over and let them take it." "Yeah, because we're just that generous," Skipper said, a wry grin tugging at his lips. "Generosity has nothing to do with it," Jax shot back. "It's about survival. And if we're going down swinging." Aiden chuckled, shaking his head. "Always the optimist, Jax." "One of these days it might actually get us somewhere. Or get us killed," Lyra added, her tone dry but not without a hint of admiration. "Either way, it'll be one hell of a story," Jax said, glancing at his team. Despite the odds, they were a resilient bunch, and that gave him hope in the face of overwhelming adversity. "All right, let's get some rest while we can," Jax said, rising to his feet. "Tomorrow we regroup and figure out our next move." The team nodded in agreement, settling in for a few precious hours of sleep, an elusive commodity when you're public enemy number one. As Jax closed his eyes, he allowed himself a moment of peace. They'd escaped the lab, proved the Zorathi weren't infallible, and bought themselves time. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep them fighting. In a universe that seemed hell-bent on their destruction, they'd continue to defy the odds, proving that humanity had a stubborn streak a mile wide. They might be flawed, irreverent, and hopelessly cynical, but together They were a force to be reckoned with. And for now, that was all that mattered. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk morning, or what passed for it in their dreary corner of the galaxy, came too quickly. The team gathered around a rickety table, each bearing the marks of a restless night. "So what's the situation?" Jax asked, addressing Lyra, who was once again engrossed in her tablet. "Well," Lyra began, glancing up with a tired smile, "the good news is we've got a bit of a head start. The bad news: the Zorathi are probably not too happy about it. Can't imagine why," Aiden said, feigning outrage. "We were the perfect guests who trashed their lab and escaped," Skipper pointed out, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied grin. "Details," Jax said with a shrug. "So what's our next move?" "We need to keep them off balance," Lyra said, her tone serious. "The Zorathi's tech has weaknesses, as we've seen. If we can exploit those, we might have a fighting chance." "Great," Madeline said, rolling her eyes. "So we're going up against a technologically superior enemy with a chip on their shoulder. What could possibly go wrong?" "Pretty much everything," Skipper replied cheerfully. "But hey, it wouldn't be an adventure without a little peril, right?" "Let's focus on the plan," Jax interjected, redirecting the conversation. "Lyra, you think you can come up with a way to mess with their systems again?" "Already working on it," she confirmed, tapping at her tablet. "There's a pattern to their encryption that we might be able to exploit." Jax nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. They'd managed to throw a wrench in the works once before. Perhaps they could do it again. "Meanwhile, we need to prepare for the inevitable," he continued. "The Zorathi won't let this go easily. We need to be ready to move at a moment's notice." "Just another day in paradise," Aiden said with a resigned chuckle. The team spent the day fortifying their temporary base, rigging up what defense they could manage and keeping watch for any sign of the enemy. The waiting was the hardest part, knowing that at any moment the Zorathi could strike. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting the landscape in long shadows, Jax gathered his team once more. "All right, folks, here's the deal," he said, his voice carrying the weight of determination. "We've got a small window of opportunity to keep the Zorathi guessing. Lyra's working her magic on their systems, and that should buy us some time. And if it doesn't," Madeline asked, her tone wary. "Then we do what we always do," Jax replied firmly. "We fight like hell and make them regret underestimating us." The team nodded, each member fueled by the shared defiance that had carried them this far. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and always one step away from disaster, but they'd faced worse odds before and come out swinging. As night fell, the air crackled with tension. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the clash to come. But Jax and his team were ready. They'd survived this long by being clever, resourceful, and stubborn enough to keep getting back up every time the universe knocked them down. So when the Zorathi came, and they would come, the team would be waiting, armed with nothing but their wits, a handful of scrapped-together weapons, and the unyielding refusal to give up. Because in the end, that's what it meant to be human, facing the darkness with a grin, a curse, and an indomitable spirit that refused to be extinguished. And if they were going out, they'd go out with a bang. The command center was as glamorous as a rat-infested alley, but it had a certain charm when you considered the alternative was being dissected for science. Jax sauntered to the center of the room, doing his best to ignore the mildew and rust that seemed to be holding hands across every surface. His team gathered around, each sporting the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for tax audits and root canals. "You know," Jax began, looking around at the motley crew, "I sometimes wonder if the Zorathi started this whole DNA collection thing just to find out if we're all as dumb as they think we are." "Well, they've got their work cut out for them," Skipper said, rolling his eyes. "I mean, I still can't figure out how to fold a damn fitted sheet." "Let's hope their tech isn't as advanced as a laundry tutorial," Madeline quipped, glancing at Lyra, who was burying her nose in that ever-present tablet like it held the secrets of the universe. Lyra spared a moment to look up, her eyes shadowed with fatigue. I'm making progress, but if they catch on, we might be dealing with an angry alien's equivalent of a temper tantrum. Lovely, Aiden snorted. Just what we need, a toddler with a death ray. At least they'll be too busy throwing toys out of their pram to notice when we make our move, Jax said with a grin that suggested he had a plan, or at least a semblance of one. With the sun doing that lazy dip beyond the horizon, they knew time wasn't on their side. The Zorathi were bound to be hot on their trail, and Jax wasn't keen on finding out how close they were willing to get. "All right," Jax announced, clapping his hands together. "Here's the deal. We're gonna dance with the devil, literally. We lure Ulthax into a trap and give him a taste of his own medicine." "Ulthax?" Skipper asked, arching an eyebrow. "Sounds like a bad rash." "More like a bad case of intergalactic hemorrhoids," Madeline added, earning a chuckle from the rest. "Focus, children," Lyra interjected dryly, rising to her feet. "I've found a way to trigger a feedback loop in their systems using their tech. It's risky, but if we can pull it off, we'll leave them scrambling." Aiden, always the skeptic, leaned back and folded his arms. "And what happens if Ulthax has an ace up his sleeve?" "Then we'll hope he's lousy at poker," Jax replied, unfazed. "But let's not count on it. We've got one shot at this. We blow the cloning device and run like hell." "Sounds like a plan," Skipper said, his grin hinting at the thrill of the challenge. "Or a really bad idea. But hey, what else is new?" The team sprang into action, a flurry of movement amid the decay. They were a ragtag bunch, but they were all Jax had, and that meant everything. Each step they took was a gamble, but they'd never been much for playing it safe. As night fell, they made their way through the woods, the air tense with expectation. Every snap of a twig sounded like a gunshot, but they pressed on, driven by a stubborn streak that could rival the mightiest cosmic forces. They reached the old lab, now a husk of its former glory. The Zorathi tech glowed ominously, casting strange shadows that danced across the ground like specters eager for a show. "All right," Jax whispered, motioning for silence. "You all know what to do. Let's give Ulthax a night to remember." With the team in position, Lyra began her work, fingers flying across the tablet. The air crackled with tension, each second dragging on like an eternity. Aiden scanned the perimeter, his gaze sharp and wary. "I don't see any welcoming committee. Maybe Ulthax thinks he's too good for a meet and greet. Or he's just fashionably late," Skipper suggested, peering into the gloom. Suddenly, the night was split by a flash of light. A hulking figure stepped into view, his form radiating an alien menace that made Jax's skin crawl. Ulthax in the flesh, or whatever passed for flesh among his kind. "Ah, the guest of honor," Jax said, stepping into the open with a casual swagger that belied the hammering of his heart. "I was starting to think you'd stood us up." Ulthax's voice was a low rumble, every word dripping with disdain. "Your defiance is futile, human. Surrender, and I might grant you mercy." "Tempting," Jax replied, his tone mocking. "But I have this thing about taking orders from intergalactic bullies. So, no thanks." As if cueing a cosmic symphony, Lyra's fingers danced over the tablet and the Zorathi tech began to flicker, lights flashing erratically. Ulthax's expression darkened. "What have you done?" Jax grinned, a flash of triumph in his eyes. "Just a little something I like to call turning the tables." The devices around them began to hum with an ominous energy, the feedback loop taking hold. Ulthax staggered back, caught off guard by the sudden turn of events. "Time to go," Jax shouted, motioning for the team to retreat. As they fled, the night erupted into chaos. The Zorathi tech imploded with a series of concussive blasts, the air filled with the acrid scent of burning circuits. The cloning device was no more, a victory snatched from the jaws of defeat. The team raced through the woods, the shadows enveloping them like a protective cloak. Behind them, Ulthax's fury echoed through the night, but they didn't stop to look back. They stumbled into the command center, breathless and exhilarated. The threat was far from over, but for now, they dealt a blow that would give the Zorathi pause. "Well, that was a thing," Skipper panted, leaning against the wall. "I'd say we just made the galaxy's most wanted list, but let's face it, we were already there." Just another day at the office, Aiden quipped, trying to catch his breath. Lyra, still clutching her tablet like a lifeline, allowed herself a rare smile. That felt good, she admitted. Feels even better knowing we've given them something to chew on, Jax said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. We may not have saved the world, but we've bought it some time. And I ourselves, Madeline added, her expression one of weary relief. As they settled in for another night, the team couldn't help but feel the weight of what they'd accomplished. It wasn't much, just a small victory in a war that seemed never-ending, but it was enough. For Jax and his crew, surviving wasn't just about defying the odds. It was about proving that humanity was more than the sum of its parts. They were scrappy, irreverent, and a royal pain in the ass for anyone who dared to underestimate them. And if the universe wanted to take them down, well, it was going to have to try a hell of a lot harder. The night wore on, but for the first time in what felt like forever, they had hope, a fragile thing, but powerful all the same. They were still here, still fighting and still refusing to give in. And as long as they had that, they had a chance. The command center smelled of stale sweat and something that might have been mildew, but everyone pretended it was victory. Jax leaned against a rusting console, watching his ragtag band of misfits as they sifted through the chaos of their recent triumph. Madeline was patching up Skipper's arm with what looked like duct tape and stubborn optimism, while Aiden fiddled with a Zorathi gadget, looking as likely to kiss it as to smash it. Lyra sat nearby, her fingers still tapping away on her tablet, because apparently that thing was now an extension of her soul. You know, Jax mused, scratching at the stubble on his chin, I think we taught those tentacled bastards a thing or two about not underestimating the hairless apes. Or at least how to throw a decent tantrum, Skipper said, wincing as Madeline yanked the tape with the subtlety of a bear trap. Yeah, too bad we can't charge admission for the show, Madeline added, eyeing her handiwork. We'd make a killing selling popcorn. Not that they'd have much use for currency, Aiden muttered, his voice laced with sarcasm. Unless they want to buy a nice vacation on Earth. I hear it's a lovely place to visit if you enjoy being shot at. Lyra looked up from her tablet long enough to shoot Aiden a look that could have peeled paint. We might have bought ourselves some time, but those Zorathi aren't going anywhere. They'll regroup. Let him, Jax replied, his voice as grim as his grin. We'll be ready. Maybe not good as new, but good enough to make him regret round two. They all shared a moment of silence, a collective breath that seemed to signify the fragile peace they'd carved out with grit and stubbornness. It was a temporary reprieve and they all knew it, but that didn't mean they couldn't bask in it for a moment. All right, people, Jax said, pushing off the console. Let's talk about what comes next. We've got a cloning device in pieces, some very pissed-off aliens, and just enough of a chance to keep this planet spinning. Madeline snorted. Sounds like a recipe for an all-you-can-eat buffet of stress. But it's our buffet, Skipper pointed out, giving a lopsided grin that suggested he might have taken one too many hits to the head. And I'm betting on us. I mean, we've got the element of surprise. And a knack for chaos, Lyra added, a rare twinkle in her eye. Let's not forget, Jax said, that we're not entirely alone in this mess. Maybe it's time we start shaking hands with some of the other folks out there fighting the good fight. Aiden raised an eyebrow. You proposing an alliance? Because last time I checked, diplomacy wasn't exactly humanity's strong suit. Right, Jax replied, his tone shifting to playful. But who needs diplomacy when you've got charm and good looks? Your charm's about as reliable as a Zorathi peace treaty, Madeline teased. Whatever works, Jax said, shrugging. Look, if we can get our hands on more intel and tech, we increase our odds of making it out of this mess in one piece. I'm thinking of reaching out to the Martian colonists. They've got a reputation for not taking crap from anyone, even if they're as prickly as a cactus on a bad day. And if they decide to tell us to piss off, Aiden asked. Then we'll raise a glass to old-school human stubbornness and keep doing what we do best, making life as difficult as possible for anyone who thinks they can push us around, Jax said, his eyes gleaming with mischief. Skipper, staring at the ceiling like answers might be written there, said, "I kind of like that plan. It's got a certain fly-by-the-seat-of-your-pants charm." Like a drunk pilot, Madeline offered, crossing her arms. "We might just manage to surprise a few people," Lyra said, finally standing up and tucking her tablet under her arm. "I'll bet the Zorathi are already wondering how we got this far." "Let's make sure they keep wondering," Jax said, his voice hardening with resolve. "We've got work to do, and I'm not planning on letting the universe win. Not today." They set to work amidst the detritus of their temporary victory, each person slipping easily into their role. Madeline and Skipper started sorting through the few usable supplies they had scrounged from the Zorathi wreckage, while Aiden turned his attention back to the holographic map, a tool that seemed to have more lives than a cat. Lyra, ever the multitasker, was already devising new strategies, fingers flying over her tablet like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of survival. Hours passed, and the once chaotic command center began to feel almost functional. Jax watched his team with a mixture of pride and disbelief. They were still here, still fighting. He couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope, a precarious, flickering thing, but alive nonetheless. "Hey, Jax," Aiden called, his voice cutting through the quiet. "We're getting a signal from New Geneva. Looks like someone managed to patch through the static." Jax straightened, a knot of tension tightening in his gut. "Let's hear it." Aiden adjusted the settings, and the voice that crackled through the speakers was both familiar and unexpected. "This is Colonel Harris, broadcasting to any resistance forces. We've managed to regroup and prepare defensive positions at New Geneva. If you're receiving this, know that the fight isn't over. We stand ready to assist." Skipper whistled low. "Well, I'll be damned." "Harris is still kicking." Jax allowed himself a small smile. "Seems like the universe hasn't caught up with him yet." Madeline folded her arms, looking thoughtful. "If they've got defenses, maybe we can pool resources. Hit the Zorathi where it hurts. Or at least where it stings," Lyra added, her voice tinged with determination. "All right then," Jax said, the pieces of a plan falling into place. "Let's get in touch with Harris. We're gonna need all the help we can get." As Aiden worked to establish a secure connection, Jax addressed the team. "We might be facing impossible odds, but we're not gonna roll over and let the universe have its way with us. We'll build alliances, gather intel, and when the time comes, we'll make sure the Zorathi remember just what it means to piss off humanity." The room hummed with a shared energy, a spark that ignited every member of the team. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were fighters, architects of their own destiny, and Jax wouldn't have had it any other way. As the signal stabilized and Colonel Harris's voice came through more clearly, Jax leaned in, ready to make their case. "Colonel, this is Jax Veridan. We've got a plan to turn the tables on the Zorathi, but we're gonna need a little backup." Harris's voice was steady, though the exhaustion was evident. "Veridan, heard about your stunt at the lab. Damn fine work. We've got resources, but we're spread thin." "What do you propose?" Jax outlined their strategy, his words concise and confident. He spoke of alliances, shared intel, and the potential to strike back with precision. Harris listened, occasionally interjecting with questions that cut to the heart of the matter. When he'd finished, there was a pause, a moment where the fate of their plan hung in the balance. "All right, Veridan," Harris finally said. "We'll coordinate with you. But remember, the stakes are high. We can't afford to slip up." "We won't," Jax promised. As the conversation continued, the rest of the team busied themselves with preparations. Ever the pragmatist, Lyra was already compiling data from the tablet, her eyes scanning line after line of code. Skipper and Madeline took stock of their remaining supplies, counting each bullet and ration like it was the most precious thing in the universe. Hope was a fragile thing, easily shattered, but in that rundown command center, it was alive and well, held together by duct tape, sarcasm, and sheer willpower. As they set about their tasks, Jax took a moment to reflect on how far they'd come. They were just a handful of humans in an endless cosmos, but they'd managed to make their mark, to remind the universe that Earth wasn't so easily conquered. He thought of all the things that had driven them: desperation, defiance, and that unyielding spark of stubbornness that refused to be extinguished. They were a peculiar breed, humans, scrappy, flawed, and as resilient as they were unpredictable. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. With the coordinates set and their plan in motion, Jax and his team prepared to face whatever lay ahead. They were ready to fight to survive, and to remind the Zorathi that humanity wasn't backing down. As the sun began to rise, casting its first tentative rays across the battered landscape, Jack stood with his team, their faces set with determination. "Let's show them what we're made of," he said, his voice steady and sure. And with that they stepped into the dawn, ready to take on the universe one stubborn, irreverent step at a time.